We've reached the end of the scientific program of the symposium.
Oh.
And it was really an excellent symposium and scientific program. On behalf of the audience, in this case, I would like to thank the organizers for bringing up such a distinguished panel of speakers. And I would like to thank the speakers for coming to honor Joel on one hand and to share with us, the audience, some of their scientific achievements and vision. And also to tell us some unknown or untold stories about Joel as well. Joel and I go back many years. I think we have known each other from the first days. Joel and I joined the Weizmann Institute sometimes in the mid-70s, if I'm not mistaken. We were in sister departments, as we can call. I was in organic chemistry, still is, and Joel in structural chemistry at the time, but then later on became structural biology. We've been good friends and colleagues, although we haven't collaborated on any scientific project for many, many years. I think until about 11 years ago, when I joined Joel, Silly, and Joel. At the beginning, I think it was just discussing the possibility of maybe having a proteomic, a structural proteomic service unit somehow built up at the Weizmann Institute of Science. I think it took us about 2 years of dreaming, planning, writing memos, meeting different authorities at Weizmann and the Ministry of Science, and then, of course, writing grant applications, Weizmann internal grants, national grants, and as you heard from David, also to the European community. And after 2 years, it all, I think the timing was really perfect, and we launched about, I think it was 8 years ago, the ISPC here. And as you heard from Oli, and I will not elaborate on that, it is a success, and I hope it will continue to be a success. And I challenge Joel to celebrate its 10th birthday in 2 years, in December 2012. And when I say it took 2 years, for those of us who know Joel, that means at most 1 year of his time on campus. And this is really at most. So for those who don't know Joel but heard a little bit from Lee Moore, I think I can define Joel in a different term that everybody else is using. Joel is a restless guy. And as restless, I mean he needs at least one exciting event every single week of the year. And this event, I think, can be, or I define it as one of 3 types of events. It could be one, adopting a new scientific technology or purchasing very, very expensive scientific equipment. The second one would be to get, I think, the most sophisticated or the up-to-date Macintosh or server or software or a peripheral gadget for him or for the lab. And the third type of thing would be, do you guess? Going abroad.
Nothing about science.
And for sometimes I thought that, I know for sure, I think that Joel loves Israel, loves the Weizmann, loves the lab, But I think what he enjoys most is longing to these places from far away. Most of his time. So, Joel, we are very grateful to you that you found the time to join us. However, we are saddened by the tragedy that Chaya is no longer with us. So I'm confident that she would have approved of this symposium taking place exactly according to the original schedule. And this getting together is in your honor and in her memory. So I'm really honored to introduce our last speaker of the day, Joel. And we truly love you, and I don't have to introduce you anymore. Everybody knows you in this subject.
Yigal, thank you very much, and especially the last comments when Chaya passed away. I wasn't sure at all about whether we should continue with this symposia. I want to thank Gidon, who's sitting in the front row, who really did most of the work organizing. He told me to think myself and make the decision, and he didn't put any pressure. But when I decided to go ahead, he was wonderful in coming to me and asking me all sorts of questions that I didn't want to answer, but otherwise the symposium wouldn't have taken place. So Gidon, I really thank you a lot. So what I wanted, I didn't know what to talk about because I knew you all would be tired. So I thought best to try to give you a little bit of ideas of where I really began in science, and to really stress that I think science doesn't go in a straight line. Sort of contrary to all of the EC projects that we work on, that you have to put all of the deliverables and everything else. It doesn't work that way. Where you start, soon it changes. We heard this from several of my students. And the second thing, which is really what I really will talk about, is, Joel, what are you doing? In the sense, I felt that it's as important, despite what everyone says about my trips, it's as important when you do science to try to do interesting science, but to be able to explain it in a way that someone else can capture really what is the essence. A little bit like what Limor showed at the very end when she showed the schematic after all the details, then you began to understand what it was all about. And I think it shouldn't just be schematic, but it has to be at some point conveyed. And that's what I will really try to focus on. And I promise also it won't be too long, right? So maybe I just will start for the few people who are new and didn't know Chaya. These are just a few pictures of Chaya. This was in Central Park several years ago. And this was at the Brit Milah of our first son in North Carolina. Unfortunately, we couldn't find a mohel, a traditional man, to do the circumcision. We had to import him from Virginia. And this is Chaya in Italy. A more recent picture here. And here is possibly the best. This is with Yo-Yo, the daughter of Ichun and Minjun. And Chaya longed to see her grandchild, which I'm afraid may be being born right now. We'll have to find out. I turned off my telephone. So anyway, that's Yo-Yo. She's very big. So she was in our home. She was born in Kaplan Hospital here in Israel to Ichun. So maybe just I'll begin a little bit like we heard from several of the students. I did a rotation in MIT in Alex's lab. Alex is a constant visitor to the Weizmann, and he always would come and talk. I must say, when he talked to me, often Isili was in the lab with me, he would tell us exactly what's going to be in his lecture. He always gives a lecture at the Weizmann. He never used any notes or slides, and they were fascinating. So one time I decided to film Alex in the lab, and so you can hear Alex.
Now it's recording, Alex.
Okay, but supposing you make the picture, how then do you play the sound?
Typical of kind of Alex's questions. But the reason I show you just is that I took a course, kind of a guided reading course at MIT that he was the instructor. And at one point he called me aside and talked to me in a very nice way. And I want to give you a feeling of what it was and how he spoke to me. So it's in a movie that maybe all the people who spoke and are older than the ones who spoke would appreciate, and other ones I hope have seen. So this is what did Alex tell me in 1966?
Plastics. Is it great future in plastics? What do you think about it? Yes, I will. Upset. That's the deal.
So it was virtually like that, except Alex said structure, and he really meant it. So and I listened to him, and I think it came out okay. So better than for Dustin Hoffman, so, until the end of the movie. So Alex gave me a project as a rotation student. 5 milligrams of this in a sealed vial. I didn't quite know how to open it. You had to open it with a knife to crack it open. And I didn't realize that he had given this same kind of vial to the last 5 or 6 rotation students. None of them succeed. I came from physics and math. Not like Oded and Limor and so on, we're chemists. So I didn't have a clue how to crystallize this. And the purpose of this, as you can see, it's UPA. It's a small dinucleoside phosphate. The goal was to see crystal structure, to see really if Watson and Crick were right. No one had seen the details of this. So I went and found a paper on how someone crystallized AMP. And something like in pH 3.5. So I mixed it up with this acidic solution, and I got crystals. I got crystals almost as fast as Orley got crystals of MDH. But it was also a difficult thing to solve, it turned out. And but we assumed, since it's got a U and an A, it would form a standard Watson-Crick double helix. And I wasn't even sure why we were doing this, but it didn't come out a little bit like Alex's structure. It didn't come out quite the way we planned. So as I heard from a number of people, recruited some good colleagues, Helen Berman, Sung-Hou Kim, and Ned Seaman. That's me, some time ago. And sitting on the grass in front of MIT. And we took the data we collected in Fox Chase on a diffractometer in Jenny Glusker's laboratory. And Ned helped a great deal with anomalous dispersion, even these days, finding the phosphates, and we solved the structure. But I won't go into the solving. I want to show the picture. So structure is a little bit like what Limor is saying. We had 2 molecules in the asymmetric unit. One we called UPA1, one we called UPA2, and in the middle I show a picture of a standard RNA single-stranded, well, part of a double-stranded structure, but this is RNA 11, which would go up and have its base pairs there. And this is a static picture which doesn't do any justice at all to try to see what's happening in this structure. So we put, this is with Jenny Glusker, helped a great deal. She put hands on the sugars, on the oxygen. So this is showing that the oxygens are pointing in the same direction, the helix. In this case, they're pointing in the same direction. You can see it sort of rotates around. But here, the 2 hands are pointing in the opposite direction. So I didn't know how I was going to explain this. So I applied to the ACA meeting in 1971, was going to present this paper. And I was very fortunate. I was then already a graduate student in Cy Levenfeld's lab, as you heard from Shoshana. And we were very lucky at MIT to have the very first computer graphics system. This is about the size of half of this room, only devoted to this one cathode ray tube with this globe that had rotation this way, and around. We had 3 degrees. We could do everything you could do on a Macintosh today on this, but it cost somewhat more. That's Cy Leventhal. I couldn't find any other pictures of Cy taken there. And so we had this machine. We had access to the first protein structures, and we could display. And so we made one of the first computer-generated movies. And I showed this, and I had to speak in this meeting in Ames, Iowa, just after Olga Kennard. And I was a young graduate student, quite frightened. She was speaking on the structure of ATP, and I was speaking on this dinucleotides. So I made this movie. As Lee Moore said, with a camera photographing the screen, and Itzik, who's up here, converted it into a computer movie for us. I'll show it to you. It's going to show the 2 conformations. I cut it out, not the whole movie, a short portion of it. So this is a picture of what double helical RNA would look like, and I'll show you what I worked on. It's a small piece of RNA, a very small piece. It will come out in a second. This is 1971. That's the piece I worked on, that's what we thought it would look like. But it didn't look like that, so I'll show you the UPA1. That's RNA 11. And this is what happens going from UPA1 to converted. It first rotates around 1 bond, 1 phosphodiester, and then the second phosphodiester bond, almost like the psi angles of a protein. And it converts UPA1, which is this bent, kind of coiled, looped structure, and now it looks like an RNA 11. What would happen if you took a normal RNA helix and you put a UPA1 inside the structure? So this is a nice single-stranded RNA 11 helix. And we're going to rotate the first phosphodiester bond to make it like that of UPA1. And then the second. And what you can see, this structure, the UP1, is a real model for how RNA can turn a corner. So I showed this people, I think, understood really the structure, helped a great deal. And very soon afterwards, I went and did a postdoc with Sung-Hou Kim at Duke, working together with Alex at MIT, and we determined the first crystal structure of a tRNA, and it had a number of these tight turns just like in the UPA1 structure. I was fortunate while I was there to work with Shoshana. This is a picture of Shoshana, also in Central Park with Marcel. And I want to show you a movie that Shoshana and I made. Shoshana did most of the movie, but I filmed it. So I only show you the first 20 seconds of the movie. It doesn't have too much molecule in it. But that's Shoshana. This is our, it was an adage computer then, right? And we had many controls. It's from a movie this again, Itzik made for us. But then you'll see Shoshana in a second. So it really, I think, captures Shoshana wonderfully. The reason I show all this is that I spent a long time doing my PhD. In America, it's not like here where after 4.5 years you finish. I spent 3 years at MIT, and then my advisor moved to Columbia. So it took 6 years for my PhD. And then he wanted me to postdoc. I liked Cy very much. We did fine. So I said, couldn't I possibly just spend a month or two somewhere? And I said, I met Shoshana. Maybe I could go to Israel and meet another Shoshana. So, so he arranged for me to go to Yehuda Lapidot's laboratory. And I met Chaya, and then it was all very good history. So I'll show you a few other women in my life. So that's Ada. Ada here, I don't know if Ada here, but there's Ada. This is from the Eretche meeting in 1976. This is on the web. And I'll show you another picture. I show Ada because when I was here in 72 in Yehuda's lab, probably she'll speak about this. I won't steal all her thunder. So I met Ada then, and she helped me a lot in taking some pictures. I won't go more Ada. Beseda? But this is she will do justice. But this is a picture from 1985. You can see a number of people: Zippy, Heidi, Ed Trifonov. Over here is Ada and Ruth Nusinov. And then down here is Mike Levitt with a beard. And there's Menachem. And here is Professor Schneur Lifson. We were extremely fortunate in those days with Schneur here. We used to have meetings about once every 2 weeks in the Perlman, first floor of the Perlman. We had no overhead, nothing. You just would write on the blackboard, not a whiteboard. And Arne Hagler was there, Mike Levitt was there, Barry Honig was there some of the time, John Molt was there, and we didn't realize, just how much was going on in that period. So it was nice. So, well, we had a serious problem with the Weizmann. We had very poor X-ray instrumentation. People don't remember this, and of course no one cares anymore because you go to the synchrotron, but those days we didn't go to the synchrotron. We had a machine, and I was abroad. I think I was in David Davies' lab as a sabbatical, and I got a letter just before I was coming home that I was elected chairman of the department temporarily while Mendel Cohen was going to be on sabbatical. It's not like nowadays where you're appointed by the dean. So, and I think I was elected because no one else volunteered, and I was away, so I couldn't say no. So, doesn't matter. But I made a decision. That we had a number of problems. I won't go into all of the problems in the department, but one key problem was that the X-ray equipment was impossible to do any data of proteins. And everyone said, you cannot solve it. It's always going to be this way. And I said, we're going to solve it. And Sir John Kendrew helped us a great deal. And the deans helped us. And the European Friends of the Weizmann helped us. But the problem was that we got the money from the European Friends of the Weizmann. And we went to visit on Rafnonius to test the instrument, which was called the very fast X-ray collector with the TV scanner. And while we were in Delft, it was not possible after 3 days to get a single diffraction spot. So I decided to call it the slow instead of the fast. And so we got the money from the Friends of the Weizmann in Europe, and I told them I wanted to buy a Japanese machine. And I was told quite clearly that's not possible. So I did something which was not done in this. I was chairman of the department. I told the administration, I don't think you were there, Ruti, at the time, so it's okay, that I didn't want the money. And they were in a state of shock. And I said if we took the money, it wouldn't work and we would never have a second chance. And they came back 2 weeks later and they said we could buy whatever we wanted. So Felix, that's Felix over there. And I went on our own funding. We didn't, the company, Rikaku wanted to pay, we came on our own to China. This is a board of directors meeting in Rigaku. I'll just show you a few pictures of Felix. This is Felix mounting a crystal in Tokyo on the AFC5, testing it out with one of the engineers showing us all the schematics. We had great discussions with them, and they tried all sorts of things with Felix. And so, in any event, the instrument was fine. Maybe I'll just mention though. So we arranged to purchase it with an option, an unusual option that if we didn't like it, after 1 year we could return it at no cost. We just have to ship it back, pay the shipping costs back. They agreed to let us have one of our engineers, Yakov Shabtai, go to Japan to be trained as a Rigaku service engineer, and they gave us all of the service manuals because we knew it was going to be hard to have the service here, and they would sell us enough spare parts so that we could service it, except for extraordinary things. Everything was fine. Yaakov complained a little bit after the first month that he was working too hard there, but it's okay. But the machine arrived, and it didn't work. It didn't work at all. And it was very bad, because there was a lot of discussion whether we should have bought this Japanese machine. And I got a letter from Mr. Y. Shimura, the president of Rigaku, that he wanted to come visit. I said, you can come visit, but we really have a serious problem. He says, no problem, I give you a present. So I thought he was going to give me a pen holder or something. So Mr. Y. Shimura came to the lab with other people. He also used to play golf in Caesarea, so he liked coming here. This was the first Rigaku machine bought anywhere in Greater Europe. And he came and he said, I heard you have some small problem. Yeah, I said, small problem. We found a tiny little problem. He replaced the entire insides of the machine. He had a crate, I don't know, from here to over there. 2 of them, he put it and it worked afterwards. And the machine has worked. It's still working now. No? Stop working, Linda? Almost worked. But it worked for a long time. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, it was a good machine. So then it resulted in some wonderful things. We had a visit about in the early 80s of Håkon Hopi. He's a great crystallographer from Davies with an angstrom sign in the second letter of his first name. And he had done extensive work on cryocooling of small molecules. And before he left in the early 80s, I said, Håkon, think about it. Maybe it's possible to cryocool protein crystals. But of course, it's not possible because if you think about it, protein crystal is 60% water. If you were to freeze it, it would expand and crack the crystal. So nobody would cryo-freeze a protein crystal. But anyway, Håkon came back. He says he thinks he has an idea how to do it. And this is together with Felix. He has less hair now than before. And what Håkon's idea was to flash freeze it so fast that the crystal would form a glass and not actually form an ice crystal and not expand. It was difficult to convince the people in the X-ray lab, even though Felix is in charge, to let us try this experiment. We tried it 1, 2, I think initially concanavalin A. We flash froze 8 crystals, and then it took off. Otto then made some extraordinary experiments to flash freeze ribosomes, and it took off. So it was in this lab in around 1986 that this first thing really happened. So I won't go into all the other, I'm just going to show 2 stories because we heard a lot about it and all these other things before, including this golden rectangle from Limor. But I want to just tell you 2 very short stories and stop. The first was work that we were dreaming on. This is work that Israel and I really wanted to see. We wanted to see in real time the reaction of acetylcholinesterase. It goes fast, about 20,000 times a second. So we thought we could use Laue diffraction, and we set up the experiments to flash, cause the reaction to start with a compound inside it. All this was fine on paper, and we did some work. Mia Ravis, who is here, did some wonderful Laue studies on compounds that we had done monochromatic, and the results came out very similar, so we knew it would work. But before we started, I said we should do a simple control. Maybe we should just see what happens to the protein if we keep repeatedly exposing it. So we did a simple experiment before doing the Laue with monochromatic light X-rays in Grenoble, where we took a crystal, collected data as fast as possible. In those days, it was about 5 minutes. Now it's about 5 seconds or so. So we collected data, let it rest, collected again. We got 9 data sets, and we were just curious how much overall troubles would be. These are cryo-cooled crystals. Nothing should happen to them because they don't suffer radiation damage. And this was done with Gitai Krieger, Raymond Ravelli, Mia Ravis, Martin Veck, and Michal Harel. Martin, Raymond, and Mia are here. Gitai said he was going to come. They came from abroad, which was just not for this talk. They just came. So we did this experiment, and the results were totally not what we thought. We thought it would the protein would sort of decay a little bit here, maybe. What we saw is that the X-rays caused specific damage to one portion of the protein and not other portions of the protein. So if you look around campus, I don't know how long it will be on, maybe it will stop. There have been some movies showing pictures of proteins with things hitting it. And I'll show you this movie that was made at Cornell University by Richard Gilliland. And if all goes well, you'll hear his voice showing this experiment of 9 successive sets of X-rays on the same crystal, what happens to the protein.
The European Synchrotron Radiation Facility in Grenoble produces some of the brightest X-ray beams on Earth by accelerating electrons around a vast storage ring. By studying how X-rays are scattered by tiny protein crystals, pictures of molecules can be reconstructed in atomic detail. There is a price to be paid for using intense radiation. Protein crystals rapidly disintegrate in the beam. Until recently, damage was thought to occur in a random, haphazard fashion. In the large, there is very little apparent change in the backbone atoms. The center of chemical activity, the active site, is a region buried deep between the domains. Disulfide bonds help to stabilize the backbone by tying together nearby strands. First, let's examine this bond on the exterior of the protein. Here we see the actual change in electron density during the course of the experiment. This disulfide bond disintegrates within the first few minutes of exposure. Now let's examine a bond deeper inside the protein. Surprisingly, this bond isn't affected. This disulfide remains intact for the duration of the experiment.
So I just will say that we thought, when we saw these pictures, it was all the work was collected in Grenoble, and Raymond Martin came back, Mio was here. We looked at these pictures after they did the refinement, and it was mind-boggling, and we knew this was a major thing. It took 9 months of arguing with the referees, but eventually it was published in PNAS on the cover, so it came out fine. So I won't go into much because we heard from Orly. These are the people who helped found the Israel Structural Proteomics Center, which has worked out wonderfully. The staff is shown here, and it's in the Mayer building. The Weizmann was very kind after we were in the Kimmelman building scattered throughout. When it was finally decided that we'd have space, we were given sufficient space, and the building was remodeled according to our plans. It had to be remodeled because it was condemned because of asbestos. So someone had to move in, but now the asbestos is done. I will also not go into this. We heard this from Chaim. We developed Proteopedia with Chaim and Eran Hodis, who unfortunately cannot be here today. And I will skip this now. But you can go to the website, and we saw this picture from Orly as well. So I could go on with many other stories, but mainly I wanted to stress, I think it's important to try to work with wonderful people, but when you finish the work, to try to find some way to explain it so someone else may have a clue what you were doing. And so I really want to thank key people who aren't all here, my mother with Brutus the dog, my father, who we're very fortunate, came specifically to the symposium against my sister's wishes in America. My son, who couldn't make it back from the States. Daphne, who may be in the hospital giving birth right now. And Shai, who came somewhere. And unfortunately, Haya, I think would have really wanted us to go ahead, but is not here. So thank you very much. So